Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Burns number 591 in a 606 finish. The 591 is a typical manual flush bolt for a wood door application. The 606 or US 4 is satin brass, and while I'm removing it from the packaging, this is available in the following finishes: 605 for polished brass, 606 for satin brass, as I'm about to show, the 612 for satin bronze, the 613 for oil rubbed bronze, and then the 625 for polished chrome, the 626 for satin chrome. So here is a UL listed flush bolt, which means it's appropriate for use on fire rated doors because it's listed, it's even labeled. This would be appropriate for those applications that would permit a manual latching on an inactive door. And generally, there is an instance when that is permissible. And generally, it's when you do not have occupancy or human occupancy as the norm on the protected side of the doorway. What that really translates to is a condo building that's going to have electrical closets that are double doors and might only be 6 feet deep, that sort of scenario, 4 feet deep. That would be, it's generally permissible to have manual flush bolts on that inactive door, or a manual bolt. And that's where the UL label may be appropriate for your application. If it's non-rated, the fact that it's UL labeled, okay, that's no problem, but it doesn't change anything in your respect on this piece of hardware. So the 591 is a wood door style, and how does that differentiate itself from a metal door style, which I think that part number is a 590. Let's take a look. 590, 606. I want to be sure that I'm pulling the proper part number. Yeah, so a 590 is the manual style for a metal door. The inherent difference is this. This L angle style is appropriate for wood doors because its requirements of preparation is conducive to a wood door application. The manual lever extension flush bolt, the 590, has the same body except that this plate is removed. This rod all of a sudden becomes about 10 3/4 long, runs with the bolt up to the top of the door. Okay, so that's really the only difference. But if you're going to mortise a wood door for a flush bolt, this is the style that you'll find that you can do without specialized tooling. The 590 is going to require that you drill a long hole from the top and bottom of the door to get that to where you need it to be prepped. Okay. So the 591 is the best choice. The downside, of course, of a 591 is Burns is not going to be able to give you a longer version of this if you've got an 8-foot door. Not that there are companies that can do that, or a company at least I can think of. So this would be typical for 6/8s and 7/0s without a step stool. So we talked about the different finishes we can get this in. Let's talk about the application we talked about, where you will use it. You can use it anywhere where you've got a pair of wood doors, including those that are listed or labeled that require a labeled listed product and that are permissible to use a manual style. Now there's a link below this video to a document called Template, and that template is really handy because it will show you its dimensional properties and by extension what you need to do to prep it. So first of all, if you're identifying a flush bolt, start with the height, 6 3/4. That's very common. Not all flush bolts are 6 3/4, that's to be sure, but 6 3/4 is incredibly common. 1 inch is the most common width, although not all of them are 1 inch wide. Some are 1 1/4. Others are smaller when you get into specialty aluminum storefront applications. So 6 3/4 by 1, that's almost all flush bolts by percentage. The dimension on the top plate, as you can see from that template in the upper left-hand corner, is 2.5 inch. Okay. Now, studying the rest of the template, and you do have this galvanized steel box here. It's a dust box, and you do want to install this, and that's going to clamp on, clippity clamp on. Like this, because what you don't want is the core of the door creeping through the obvious voids that are going to be here. So you want to look at it this way. We don't have to look at it with that plate, but imagine that the box is there. So since that's the way we're going to talk about mortising it, let's just leave that on because it's visually easier to understand from a preparation perspective. Now, talking about the mortise, how you're going to prep the door. A router is obviously the right way to do it, or the best way. I shouldn't say the best way. I would say that it's the proper way. You could sure use a hammer and a chisel, but my goodness, you'd be there all day. You don't want to do that. A router is going to involve, obviously, some sort of a guide or a template, one that is either manufactured that you've bought or one that you've made yourself. And with a router, it's going to be easy work in the sense of it will look utterly professional when you're done. Studying the template does require that we take a little bit of an analytical, review of the drawing. It's not a complicated drawing at all in terms of the world of templates, but let's just break it down. So you're going to have a 2.5-inch prep here. You know that you've got 1/4-inch radius. So all of a sudden that tells me let's work with a 1/2-inch diameter bit. Okay, that'll leave me a 1/4-inch radius. We know that the width of that prep is 1 inch wide. Well, it's also the same width as the face, which is also called out on the template. It is. It's called out in the template on the top portion as well, and there would be that would be the proper perspective. It's 1 inch, so 2.5, 1 inch. Now the face, we know that's 6 3/4, and we know it's 1 inch. So now you know how far back and how far down to go over, and how far and how wide. The next question is to accommodate the body. You can see it says a 1 3/8 mortise depth from the edge of the door to where you're going to account for the dust box. You're going to come down 6 inch from the top of the door to the top of here. You can come down a little bit longer if you want. Your goal is that these two screws have solid material to bite into, and the top as well. So it gets into the next question of how to go about doing it. I would call this a 2-step process, really a 3-step process. I'm going to take my mortise and I'm going to prep for this body. I'm going to go 6 inch down. I'm going to go 1 3/8, 1 inch wide. In fact, I would even cheat that. I might go 15/16. Okay. I would also argue that if the router is the carpenter's or the woodworker's best friend, the caliper is its second best friend. I'd put a caliper on that body, and I can see that I'm about 7/8. So I might be really tempted to go with a 7/8 prep or a 15/16 prep rather than 1 inch. Now that's diverting ourselves off of what the template says, but with experience, you start to look for ways to make the installation more elegant. The purpose of that is it's going to give yourself a tiny shelf for the faceplate to sit on. Okay, you don't have to. No one's going to do that, but I would, and I do, and I have. So I might be considered to make my body prep a little bit smaller. 2 preps, body and plate. My body prep's going to be 1 3/8. It's going to be that wide, which maybe, let's say 15/16. And it's going to go from the top of the door 6 inch down. That's my body prep. Now I'm just going to come in and clean my plate prep. I'm going to make a 1 inch wide, 6 3/4. Okay. Skim that down the thickness of this, which is called out on the template at 1/8 of an inch. Then, same thing for the top. That's going to be 5/64 of an inch is the thickness of that preparation. And that's really going to be the entire preparation. So basically 1/8 of an inch thick here all the way up to the top of the door, 1 inch wide, 1/8 of an inch deep, square corner, then just 5/64 of an inch up at the top. Okay, so that's going to be ever so slightly greater, right? Slightly thicker. That's your preparation. Okay, you're only going to go back, from the 1 3/8 back to the 2.5, so another 1 1/8. You're in good shape. Square these, leave those radiused, top and bottom. That's how you're going to do this. The bolt is preset. It's got the shape of a D. That's normal. That is de-prepped as well. You don't want that bolt. If it was round, they would creep out on you over time. Okay, it's going to include its strike plate. It's just going to be a generic type finish that will be used for both brass, polished, and satin. A bag of combination screws for use in both wood and metal doors. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Burns products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. I'm partial to Burns, and it's because they are an independent company producing trim and auxiliary hardware. They are not owned by a company who's owned by a multinational company, which isn't a bad thing. But there is a certain element of being able to talk to somebody who has been in the hardware industry for years, and in this case, decades, and I think generations as well. At a certain point, you like to talk to hardware people as well, someone who understands it and have a direct line. Burns gives you that sort of feel like you're dealing with people who, they know one thing. They know hardware, and that's what they do. And that's a nice traditional sort of feel in this homogenized Amazonification culture that we now live in, where you can still speak to an expert when it comes to hardware. Any questions on the Burns 591 in a 606 or US 4 finish or any other Burns product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.